Hello, good day, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the workshop. So, we're going to be getting started in just a moment, but I'll give everyone a moment to join us in the session and find your audio settings. In the meantime, feel free to reintroduce yourself in the chat if you'd like to say who you are and where you're joining us from. And we'll get started in just a moment. I see the attendee numbers going up at the moment, so I'll give everyone a minute to join us. As a quick reminder, and I'll say this again once everyone's here, we do have Khmer interpretation available for today's session. So you can access that in the bottom pane under interpretation and select, unfortunately, you have to select Chinese if you recall, due to the limitations on Zoom languages. But if you select Chinese, you'll then have the Khmer interpreter there for you. All right, so I see our numbers are slowing off. Maybe we'll have a few more joiners, but I think we'll get started because we've got lots to cover. So it's great to see you all again, and welcome back everyone today to our second part of our two-part workshop on gender equality in capital markets. So as I've mentioned to those who were there at the start, please feel free to reintroduce yourselves in the chat if you'd like to do so. But again, I'd just like to say a big thank you to the Cambodia Securities Exchange, the Laos Securities Exchange, and also the SERC in Cambodia for their collaboration and participation in this program. As you'll see, it's truly a collaborative effort, and this training was developed between IFC, UN Women, Columbia University, and with the support of the Luxembourg government. So we're really grateful to all of our partners who helped make this program happen. As a quick final reminder, again, you can access Khmer interpretation for this session if you would like to do so. To do that, you need to go to interpretation in the bottom bar and select Chinese. Sorry about that, but didn't have Khmer on the drop-down list. But if you select Chinese there, you'll be able to hear a Khmer interpreter. And many thanks to our interpreter as well for their efforts in that regard. Okay, with that, I think we'll get started. So, just as a quick reminder, for those who for those who missed part one, you can find on the event webpage, which Landon will share a link to in the chat, the slide handout for this, and we'll also put the recording of the session on the page in the next day or two as well. As a reminder, those slide handouts also include links to all of the resources that we're talking to you about today as well. All right, with that, I'm very happy to say that we're joined by another colleague, so Kate Lazarus, who's the Senior ESG Advisory Lead for the IFC in the Asia Pacific region. And as I've mentioned already, IFC are a very strong partner of ours for this program, and really grateful for the collaboration to make this program possible and bring it to you all. So I'll just hand over to Kate, who'll say a couple of words to get us started today. So many thanks, Kate, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, saksabai, sabadi. Great to be here for the second day of the Gender Equality and Capital Markets Workshop. I'm sorry I wasn't there yesterday, but again, let me thank UNSSE and UN Women for inviting IFC, and also to our collaborators and hosts, the Laos and Cambodia Securities Exchanges and the SERC in Cambodia, for hosting this important event. I note that yesterday you spent time discussing modules 1 and 2 on preparing and aligning your thoughts around this, and today you will focus on modules 3 and 4 on communicating and thus implementing. So it's a pretty exciting training, and glad that everyone is here. Just very briefly at IFC, advancing equal opportunity and inclusive leadership for women and men is a key priority for us. It's central to our development mandate, and we're really proud to partner with stock exchanges, regulatory commissions, and global stakeholders to promote equitable participation and representation of women across the capital markets and beyond. And this commitment also aligns very closely across the World Bank Group with our gender strategy till 2030, which focuses on accelerating women's empowerment as a pathway to ending poverty and building a livable planet, and strategies, focusing on how we can better end gender-based violence, and how we can further invest in human capital, expand economic opportunities, and of course, promote women in leadership. So pulling out all of the tools in our toolbox to leverage innovation, finance, collective action, working together with all of you, we can be successful in delivering these outcomes. So why does this matter? Because, the business case for advancing women's participation and inclusive leadership is stronger than ever. It's essential for building more resilient and competitive and inclusive economies. And there's a lot of empirical data and references, which you've, discussed yesterday as well, around research showing, that 1% increase in female managers can correlate to a 0.5 percent decrease in CO2 emissions. This is really highlighting the linkages between inclusive leadership, which contributes to climate smart futures, to contributing to better ESG outcomes, and that companies with more women in leadership tend to demonstrate that stronger commitment to inclusive growth, stakeholder engagement, and sustainability. We all have a role to play. And again, our IFC research has consistently shown that ESG practices are linked to better performance, and that there's a range of perspectives that can play critical roles in driving these outcomes. Yet, despite all these benefits and despite all this research and also all of this commitment, women remained underrepresented, particularly at the board level and in senior and middle management, and progress remains slow. And so really to truly move the needle, we need full and equal participation. That includes training such as, what you're having today and yesterday. We've also done extensive training on inclusive leadership for company sustainability most recently. And through our programs on ESG advisory and collaboration with UNSSC, UN Women, and others, we trying to work with the private sector to boost the skills, as well as with the government to make reforms in this regard. So IFC is proud to support these efforts, and it reflects our ongoing commitment to turning the vision of gender equality into meaningful action. And we hope that today is as successful as yesterday, and that you learn a lot, and you look at how best to bring this into your work going forward. And we stand committed to collaborate with you as well. So thank you very much, and look forward to today's workshop. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that, Kate. And yeah, great position, I think, to put things into context, and fantastic to hear about the support that IFC is providing on these topics in the region. Okay, brilliant. With that, we'll get started on getting into our content for today. So just as a quick recap, I've mentioned it already, but just as a reminder, you can access the materials for the part 1 session and indeed today's part 2 session from the event webpage, which Landon has shared the link to with you in the chat there. If you go to the resources section there, you can find all of the slide presentations and the guest speaker materials as well. And those will include links to all of the resources we're talking to you about today. As a quick housekeeping reminder, I know we were only together yesterday, so this is probably familiar, but please make sure to use the Q&A box if you've got any questions for the team. We do really encourage you to ask your questions if you have them, so please don't be shy if there's anything you want to ask as we go through the training. Please use the Q&A box to ask that question. And as you're already doing, please continue to use the chat box if you have any general comments or introductions you'd like to make as we go along as well. So again, a quick reminder that we have another 2-hour session together today with live facilitation for 2 hours. So we have opportunities throughout that, as I've said, for participation, which we really do encourage you to take part in. So we'll be using those same tools that we did yesterday with Menti and the polls. So make sure to take part in those. And I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear as well at the end of today's session, you'll be able to receive your completion certificate for taking part in the training. This requires you to fill out a feedback survey, which we'll share with you at the end of the session. And then again, just to introduce, or some of us reintroduce the speakers for today's session. So firstly, it's myself and Landon again joining you from the UNSSE team. And we're also pleased to be rejoined by our colleague Monica at UN Women, who's going to be covering some further detail again on UN Women's work that can get you started and help support you on these topics. We're also very pleased to be joined by two guest speakers who will be speaking later on in the training session. So firstly, we have Jose Godonu Atata, who's joining us from the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, and I can see you're already on the call, Jose, so great to have you with us. And then secondly, we'll have another guest speaker segment from Nina Pearson towards the end of the session. And Nina will be joining us to cover some detail on the EDGE certification process, which we introduced briefly yesterday. Okay, so with that, I'll just cover a bit of a reminder on the four modules that we have in this content. And so these have been really developed to walk you through the four steps for improving gender equality performance for global markets. And so, as Kate mentioned, today we're going to be focusing on those second two steps, which are implement and communicate. And this is really building off what we learned last lesson. So hopefully you were able to join us for that lesson yesterday. And again, an important note just to highlight here is that this is an ongoing process. So once you've started communicating on your gender equality performance, of course, this doesn't mean you're done. This, like many sustainability topics, is going to be a constant process of improvement. And so while today we're going to present these steps in a nice sequential order, of course, we know in reality you'll be working across all of these four areas together. And so just a quick reminder there on the two areas that we'll be talking about in terms of implement and communicate. So in implement, we're going to be going into the kind of investment and financial markets and thinking more about promotion and products. And then in communicate, we're going to be talking about the different ways that you can communicate with both internal and external stakeholders on gender topics. And so to help us with that, we've set two main objectives for today's training, which we're hoping we can help you achieve in these 2 hours together. So firstly, we'd like to help you understand how to capture market value for gender performance. So that could be through gender smart investment strategies or through the creation of gender focused financial products. And secondly, we'd like to help you today to navigate the communication of gender-related information, as I said, with internal stakeholders, and also to think about the guidelines that you can use to communicate gender-related information with external stakeholders, and to know what information investors are looking for in corporate reporting. So to achieve this agenda, we've got this schedule that we've set out for you here, which follows a similar format as we did last time, with around 45 minutes or so for each of our two units, a break in the middle, and then some time at the end to share some resources and answer any remaining questions that you might have. So we'll do our best to stay on time for you throughout the session today. Okay, so to get us going into the part two content today, we're going to go back to Menti as we did last time, just to get a sense, firstly, of what you already know about the topics that we're covering today. And secondly, as a quick test on one of the concepts that we covered together yesterday, just to see if you can remember what we talked about there. Okay, so the first question we have, and as a reminder, you can access Menti using that link that Landon has shared in the chat with you. You can also go to menti.com and use the code visible at the top of the screen now. And as a final option, I will also just show for now the QR code, which enables you to join on your phone as well. So just have a think and let us know how comfortable you feel currently on those three areas that we're going to be talking today about. So firstly, on the value that gender equality can add to investment strategies, on communicating gender information to investors, and finally, on explaining to colleagues the financial value of gender equality. Okay, so it looks as though maybe we're a little bit less comfortable on these topics than I think those we covered yesterday. Most people coming out somewhere in the middle, but there's a little bit of a range. So that's good to get a sense of, and hopefully we can help move you along that dial as we talk today. And then, as I said, a quick question just to test something that we covered in our session together yesterday. And then we'll do a bit of a recap on a few key concepts. But quick question just to see if you were paying attention to some of the terms we talked about yesterday. So I'll hit go on the question now. And so there's just one quick question for you here, which is the objective here equity or equality? So give you time to have a quick think. If you can remember, we talked about both of those terms yesterday. But have a think and see if you can remember what you think the overall objective is here. And then we'll talk a little bit again as a recap on those different terms. Okay, just a few more seconds to get your answers in if you're still having a think about that. And then we'll see the right answer come up. Okay, so it looks like most of you who voted got that right and voted for equality, and a few of you voted for equity, so that's okay. We know they're very similar terms, which is why we asked that slightly tricky question. But indeed, equality is the overall objective here. So I'll take us back to the slides now, and we'll do a quick recap on why it is that we're focused on equality overall. So just revisiting those terms. So what does equality really mean? So you should remember, hopefully, this diagram that we talked about last time. And here's a quick reminder of how this could play out in the boardroom. So here we say that diversity is around ensuring that multiple identities are represented. And this can include sex, gender, culture, race or ethnicity, religion, age, disability, and more. So this is the seat at the boardroom table. And then equity is all around recognizing and reorganizing power distribution. So equity is the specific aspect that relates to being able to speak. So you can think of this as providing a microphone to those who are quiet. And last but not least, we have to ensure inclusion. So this is around ensuring that everyone feels welcomed and has equal opportunities to collect, to belong, and to contribute and to be themselves authentically. So we could say that inclusion is a little bit like having the interpretation or headsets that allow everyone to understand each other and feel welcome. That's just a quick recap on those key concepts there. And I'm just going to move through these quite quickly in the interests of time, but just to recap another few things we talked about last time. As a reminder, we really spoke about the impact that increasing gender equality can have, not just for women themselves, but for society as a whole as well. So we saw in some of the studies that we talked about that increased gender equality can give us various positive outcomes for society, the economy, and environmental objectives too. And then in our session yesterday, you'll remember we also introduced the WEPs, which was shared with us by Monica. And we talked about how you can use these principles to get started on enhancing gender equality. And as a reminder, one of the key principles here we have number 7 is measurement and reporting. And so we're going to be talking a bit more about that aspect specifically today. And as a final brief reminder, we talked a bit about corporate culture as well. So you'll remember the case study we talked about with Owl Inc. and Peacock PLC. And here we really showed that corporate culture plays an important role in making sure we're setting ourselves up for success. So it's important within your organization, even if you have good intentions, that you really take into consideration culture. Otherwise, you could risk actually making gender equality worse if you take the wrong sorts of action. Okay, so that's just a quick recap, as I said, on some of the key concepts from last time. If you'd like to look at any more detail on those, you can also see that in the handout. But we're going to be now starting on transitioning into our third unit to get us started with today, which is all around accessing gender lens finance. So I'll hand over to Landon, who will be getting us started with that.
Great. Thanks so much, Fiona, and good afternoon, everyone. Good to have you all here with us again. So Jumping into accessing gender lens finance, we want to discuss the implementation of gender equality, and we'll talk a bit about products that support market action, and we'll also look at mechanisms that add value and promote gender equality in markets. We'll first look at how financial products are being used to support gender equality and what opportunities lie within those financing mechanisms for gender-allied companies. To get started, we want to take a quick look at some of the trends we're seeing in sustainable finance more broadly. This chart, which should pop up on your screen in just a moment. Sorry, so there we go. Looks at growth in sustainable funds. So this is from the 2024 World Investment Report, and it shows that in 2023, the total number of sustainability-themed funds worldwide increased, although we do see a rate of growth slowed down a little bit since 2021, but the total now stands at over 7,400 funds, which is up 7% still from 2022, and these funds are worth around 3 trillion USD. We do see in 2023 a decrease in global net investment flows to sustainable funds, but it's important to also note that this decline was a result of depressed asset values and investor withdrawals amid some persistent market uncertainties, such as high inflation, rising interest rates, poor market returns, and some concerns about potential recession in some markets. As such, sustainability-themed funds still remain an important tool to direct capital towards sustainable development. We're also seeing significant growth in gender lens investing. However, the data on gender lens investing is admittedly much more difficult to measure, and we have a less clear of an idea of the exact magnitude of funds that consider those factors. We don't have enough time today to totally delve into this topic, and as such, we've provided you with some extra slides in your handout on this. So if this is something you're keen to learn a little bit more, please review the handout slides after today's workshop. Now, I mentioned gender lens investing, so you may be asking yourself, what is that? What is gender lens investing? So I'll take a moment to discuss that. But before I give you our working definition, we would love it if you could share in the chat, what do you think gender lens investing is? So it could just be a couple key words. Maybe you have a working definition that your team uses for what gender lens investing is, but we'd love to hear a bit from you and see where your knowledge is at on gender lens investing. So I'll give you a few moments there to put in the chat what you think it is. Okay, quiet group this afternoon, so I'll give you a few more moments. Again, it could just be a few keywords or maybe a simple understanding. You can also, as Fiona says, take a guess. You don't, or there's no points for right answers, and there's also no points for wrong answers. So feel free to take a guess. One participant noted investing in women-led businesses. Great. Allison noted investment that aims to advance gender equality. Great. That's a good answer. Ben noted equal gender who make investment in financial sector. Okay. And Suntieri noted woman empowerment. Okay, great. So those are some good answers. And we'll take a look now at an official definition. And the Global Impact Investing Network, or GIIN, defines gender lens investing as investment strategies applied to an allocation or to the entirety of an investment portfolio, which seeks to examine gender dynamics to better inform investment decisions and or intentionally and measurably address gender disparities. As the name gender lens investing makes quite clear, gender is a lens. It's a way of seeing that helps an investor to highlight opportunity, illuminate risk, and understand strategy in a more nuanced way. Now, you might naturally ask next, how are investors using the gender lens to make investment decisions? And there are many different strategies. Some of the core strategies we'll take a look at specifically focus on what the focus is of an investment strategy that a gender lens takes, but often we will see a combination of multiple or all of these strategies to varying degrees, some of which you see on your screen now. The most common strategy you might be familiar with is a focus on leadership, but other areas that we see investment strategies focusing on might be employees, supply chains, products and services, as well as community. At the firm level, fund managers can drive the adoption of gender lens or gender smart investing by starting with their own investment house. So fund managers can strengthen the gender diversity of their own teams, for example, by the leadership setting clear targets or building a respectful workplace culture or making public commitments to gender diversity. The IFC has developed a framework that we link to in this slide that includes designing a gender smart investment strategy, engaging, training, and rewarding people within the firm, enhancing or adapting investment processes and systems, and identifying and collaborating with partners and external stakeholders at the firm level. At the portfolio level, fund managers can adopt strategies in both origination and portfolio management. These strategies enable fund managers to allocate capital towards companies that are committed to these 5 key areas you see on your screen now. And those 5 areas are women representation and leadership as founders, co-founders, and/or senior management, a gender diverse and equitable workforce, a gender inclusive value chain, offering and designing products or services that consider the distinct needs of women, and also ensuring their operations do no harm to women in the community. The good news is that as the benefits of gender diversity have become more and more widely recognized, investor demand for gender smart investment opportunities has increased considerably. This has led to the emergence of a variety of gender-focused products across asset classes. To give a brief overview of the investment universe, let's take a quick look here at how investment can be channeled towards gender equality and gender smart investments. On the left-hand side of your screen here, we can see that there's a few buckets in terms of the financial products that can be used to direct financial flows towards gender equality. This includes equity-based financial products, debt or fixed income financial products, such as bonds, and also funds, which can be either debt or equity-based. On the right-hand side, you see that investors accessing these financial products also vary, and we're seeing both retail or individual investors, as well as institutional investors, for example, making use of the financing vehicles on the left-hand side of the screen. It's important to note this because different investors have different needs and expectations when making investments. That leads to a diversity of products as well to meet those different needs. Before we move into some case studies I want to cover with you today, I do want to take a moment to quickly share about our new publication on gender-themed financial products. This report provides a global inventory and analysis of nearly 300 gender-themed financial instruments, including bonds, equity funds, and indices, or knowledge products across both developed and emerging markets. A few key insights include that gender-themed financial products remain a niche yet growing segment of the global financial market with index and market benchmark-based tools. We also call them knowledge tools, comprising a substantial share. We also see that government-issued gender bonds are particularly prominent in emerging markets, while gender-themed equity funds hold relatively low asset values, and there's inconsistent alignment with the women's empowerment principles, which we reviewed just yesterday. And with the absence of standardized definitions, reporting frameworks, and taxonomies, this can contribute to concerns about gender washing or pink washing, where gender labels may be used without demonstrating real substantive impact. With that, the report urges greater integration of gender equality into sustainable finance taxonomies, stronger verification mechanisms, and alignment with the WEPS and Sustainable Development Goal, or SDG 5, to ensure gender-themed financial investments deliver meaningful outcomes to advance gender equality. With that, we'll take a look now at some case studies that can help us better understand the examples or some examples of gender products. This first example we have on our screen builds on what we discussed yesterday about how climate and gender benefits can coexist. This example comes from Gold Standard, an organization focused on ensuring projects reduce carbon emissions and feature the highest levels of environmental integrity and also contribute to sustainable development. And this case study looks at the Lango Safe Water Project in Uganda. The Lango Safe Water Project received the first ever gold standard gender responsive certification in 2020, about 5 years ago. This project rehabilitates boreholes to provide clean water, and as of August 2023, credits are available to purchase on the Gold Standard Marketplace, which offers purchasers the option to choose carbon credits from a project which has been rigorously assessed to reducing gender equality in that market and in that area. I want to note a few of the climate and social impacts of this project, which is 50,000 tons of CO2 emission reductions per year. 40,000 individuals are now enjoying clean water access, reducing incidences of waterborne illness. Each household has gained almost 4 hours per week from reduced water collection needs. This mostly saves time for women and young girls who bear more of the responsibility or bared more of the responsibility for collecting water. And with that, they saw reduced school absenteeism due to less exposure to waterborne disease, as well as less time spent collecting water. But if we look even further into the gender equality impact of this project, the project also reported that the local water resource committee is approaching parity in terms of female to male representation. Reported incidences of domestic violence related to water collection have dropped to 0 compared to 35% prior to the project start, and 100% of the surveyed water users spend the time saved on domestic work as well as income generating activities or social and leisure activities. Great. So we'll share more about how gender is being included as a benefit of social bonds from Jose, but you can read the next 2 case studies in the slides in your own time. So with that, we'll take a bit of a deeper look into what exactly it means to list or invest in gender bonds.
Great. I think that's me coming in there. Sorry, just a few more minutes, Jose, and then it will be time for your segment. So I'm just going to introduce quickly a little bit of a look at what exactly are gender bonds before we hear some more detail from Jose on what Luxembourg Stock Exchange are doing on this topic. So to get us started, I just want to introduce broadly where the focus of these bonds sits. So let's just cover the basics really at this point. So as you can see here, gender bonds are a focus and kind of area, a subset of bonds within the green, social and sustainability bond universe. So gender bonds are often not seen at the moment as a category of bonds themselves, like we might see with green bonds, but increasingly we are seeing bonds that have a gender focus. And that might either be by setting distinct KPIs relating to gender, or perhaps linking the projects that support or enhance gender equality, like we saw in the climate bonds case study just then. But what to highlight here is that we can also see quite a distinct overlap with green bonds for climate and gender co-benefit. And so in terms of trends in social bonds, if we take a look at the debt markets, we can see here that overall, despite a little bit of change in recent years, there has been a large growth since perhaps 2018, 2019 in the number of social bonds in the market. And this data again comes from the UNCTAD World Investment Report, and it shows that the cumulative issuance of sustainable bonds sat at 1.5 trillion US dollars in 2023. And as I said, although we have seen a few declines since 2020, this was found to be in line with the broader bond market. So it's clear overall that social and mixed sustainability bonds are on a longer term growth trajectory. So as I said, whilst we might be familiar with green bonds, it's important to notice that specifically since 2020, we have seen more growth in these social bonds and mixed sustainability bonds as well, which will include those with gender-related objectives. So to help us determine what actually qualifies as a gender bond, there are some guidelines that are starting to emerge that we can use here. So importantly, these guidelines can be useful either if you're the issuer of such a bond, or also if you're an investor who might be looking to invest in these bonds as well and to contribute towards gender equality impacts. So you can see two examples on the screen of this sort of guidance. So firstly, the social bonds principles, which give us a set of guidelines on issuing social bonds. And then secondly, the Climate Bonds Initiative also have a methodology which is all around determining whether a bond can be included in a social and sustainability database as well. But what I think is most important to highlight about these guidelines is that they're really here to help build trust in the market and to ensure that these social bonds are designed to achieve their positive outcomes. So, of course, it isn't just enough to call something a gender-focused bond. We really need to understand the intended impact and make sure that we know whether or not that impact is being achieved. Okay, so that was just a quick introduction to this topic. So as I said, I'm very pleased that we have Jose here to join us today from the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, who's going to look a little bit more in practice with us at what Lux SE are doing on this topic. So great to have you with us, Jose, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you, Fiona. Thanks for the introduction. Can you hear me?
We can, I hear you well, yeah. So I'll stop sharing my screen now as well so that you can share your presentation.
Perfect. So nice to meet you all. I'm Jose Godon Ratata. I work at the Luxembourg Stock Exchange and more especially on the department focused on the Luxembourg Green Exchange. So we are happy to be part of this program. So Fiona already started to presenting you what we think when we talk about gender bond, what is it about? I will try to go more into detail on how we see it at the stock exchange and how we deal with it, and then share with you two case studies we have from bond listed at our stock exchange. And if you have any question, please feel free at the end of the presentation to ask them. So let me share my screen. Perfect. So when we talk about gender-focused bond, what is it, and how we deal with it? So Fiona already told you about two useful documents we have who really help to cover the spectrum of the gender bonds. But there is another really interesting document released in 2021 by the ICMA, in partnership with UN Women and IFC. And it's really helped us to, how can I say, it's a practitioner guide to use on sustainable debt for gender equality. So the objective are twofold, both on the issuer side and on the investor side. On the issuer side, this document really wanted to support or give support to the new and existing bond issuer and all the ecosystem on how they can take action to integrate gender equality objective into sustainable investment. On the investor side, the objective was really to help investors that wish to understand and support project and strategy that are designed to advance the gender equality theme and objective through sustainable development product. So this is a really useful document. You can have a look later to see how it's recommended to integrate gender equality thinking when you are doing a sustainable investment debt project. So at the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, especially at the Luxembourg Green Exchange, what do we thought when we think about gender focused bonds? We see it under two folds. under two specific area. The first area is the use of proceeds, which are the category mostly common on the market: green, social, and sustainable bonds. And the second part is the non-use of proceeds, the sustainability linked bond, but this we will see in the next slide. So at the stock exchange, when we have a use of proceed instrument and we want to qualify it as a gender-focused bond, we look on the pre-issuance documentation and on the post-issuance report to do the classification. The first one, if we go into the pre-issuance documentation, is that we check if each eligible category target the SDG 5 of the Sustainable Development Goal, gender equality. So if there is a social or a sustainability bond with 100% of its use of proceeds who is dedicated to advance gender equality objective, we classify it as a gender-focused bond. And on the other side, if there is a green, a social, or a sustainability bond with partial use of proceeds allocated to financing a gender equality related project, we flag it also as a gender-focused bond. The allocation proceeds, we look at it on the post-issuance report because on the pre-issuance it's not obvious sometimes. So what we check is that we check first on the pre-issuance. If it's clearly stated on the pre-issuance side, then we classify it. But if it's not stated on the pre-issuance side, but while reviewing the post-issuance report, we see that there has been one effective category or partial allocation of the proceed who has been allocated into gender project, then we flag it as a gender-focused bond when we fall under the use of proceed category. When we are on the SLB, it's a sustainable linked bond, which is a really different instrument. What we check is we check the KPI and the SPT, the KPI, the key performance indicator, and the sustainable performance targets. If one of those targets the SDG 5, it's classified as a gender-focused bond because it has to be aligned with this thematic of gender in one way or another. So what we do is that we check this instrument. As you know, it's a type of instrument which characteristic can really vary, which characteristic can really depend on the issuer, on the predefined sustainability or ESG objective. So what we do is that we check if the issuer commits to meeting predefined objective, and if this objective, or if at least one of these objective is targeting the gender equality, or we have a KPI and a SPT, sustainable performance target, which targets the SDG 5, then we flag it also as a gender-focused sustainability linked bond. So as you can see, the approach is different from the use of proceed, where it's clearly stated, on the SLB, where the issuer commits to do, but then you have to check, you have to verify the KPI, you have to verify the SPT, and you have to ensure that all of these two are aligned with targeting the SDG 5. Now I will share two case study of bond dual listed at the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, which are classified as use of proceed gender focused bonds. The first one is a social bond from a commercial bank in Tanzania. It's NMB. And the objective of this bond was really to focus on financing women-owned business. I don't know if Fiona, you want to share the video, or you prefer that I share it?
Sure, yeah, I can share that now.
Okay, you can.
Yeah.
Please.
Great.
It's a commercial bank, universal commercial bank, based in Tanzania, East Africa, that serves retail clients, corporate clients, and government. I'm the treasurer for the bank, so main responsibility really is around mobilizing funds, so liquidity management, foreign exchange risk management, interest risk management, and coordination, just to make sure that there's balance sheet optimization and as well as capital allocation. So our gender bond really is a use of proceeds bond, that we issued in line with the international capital markets principles under the social bonds framework that allows us to raise money from the public and finance, women-owned businesses or enterprises that are dominantly owned by women, or businesses whose products and services actually eventually, service the female. Women proposition is a very important segment for our bank. And yes, we had a very fantastic proposition for women's savings, but we realized on the financing side, we needed to do something to mobilize additional funding to support growth for women-owned businesses. So we felt it was necessary for us, because a strategic fit for us is really to diversify portfolio. And given the risk profile of women as far as loans is concerned, we realized that the non-performing loans ratios are actually lower than that of the male counterparts. Yes, so the projects we tend to finance, or that we're financing with these, are predominantly female-owned enterprises, and it cuts across different sectors, be it renewable energy, agriculture, health, education, and manufacturing as well. Obviously, it would be interesting that we measure the number of new loans that are issued to MSEs, so micro to medium and small enterprises women. But also it will be interesting for us, and we're doing that, to measure what impact that is having on their social and economic life. So how many jobs are created? Are they growing? Are they not? Are they expanding their businesses? I think those kind of metrics are very important, and it's part of our KPIs in ensuring that these funds actually put to the right use. Indeed, we've issued other types of bonds, retail bonds, corporate bonds. The difference with this gender bond is that the use of proceeds requires a lot of transparency. Investors require that you go back to them to tell them, how these funds have been used. But in addition to that, it has to go in line with, the social bond principles and in line with the international capital markets, principle on social bonds. As opposed to the other bonds that you could simply raise and finance all manner of activities, without accountability to the investors. This requires significant accountability and transparency as far as investors are concerned. It was very well received by investors, domestic investors, and as well as international investors. As a matter of fact, it got 197% oversubscription. So we had significant appetite seeing from international financiers, but as well as domestic retail and corporate investors. I think one obvious one was the misconception, that you have a gender bond in the market, financing women, and therefore there was a perception that perhaps the bond subscribers were meant to be female. And so it requires a lot of effort, marketing effort, to ensure that the male counterparts actually understood that it's not just for female, but they could also invest to help advance female. So that was a key challenge for us. But the other one is obviously data quality, especially in some of these emerging markets, still remains to be an issue. So you need to capture the right data at onboarding stage becomes very important, because you really get to realize how critical that is when you're doing your impact measurement and reporting. But the other aspect is the opportunities are still huge. The financing gap for female generally is still quite huge, and that is why there's need for us perhaps also to consider scaling up, such insurances, going forward. Yes, just related to the previous question. So we realize we need to do more still. So certainly we need to raise more funding, be it domestically, be it partnering with DFIs or development financial institutions, to just make sure that we can scale up, that portfolio. The need is there. I think we need to answer a very critical question of affordability, which keeps coming up, and hopefully using things like guarantee schemes from some of these development financial institutions will enable us actually affordably extend credit to female entrepreneurs. I think critical for me, again, back to what I've said, is data, at the onboarding stage. You need to get it right. But at the same time, just ensuring that indeed you have a pipeline sufficient enough to be covered whatever amount of bonds you want to raise, because ultimately investors demand, that level of transparency and accountability to see that these bonds are actually put to the intended use.
Oh, sorry, Jose, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Fiona. So few comments on this. I will not go back to what he has already said. But on the overview of the bond, on the last report they published this year, they were expecting initially to address 2,000 women MSAE to benefit of this program, but it has been finally 3,000 women micro and small and middle enterprise who benefited from the funding of this bond. As you see and as you hear, it has been oversubscribed, so this really helped them to really go far than they already expect. The second point is that the bond was the first gender bond issue in sub-Saharan Africa. So that was really an innovative case study to show that even when there has not been nothing done yet, a player can really decide to go on this way and innovate and do things on the best way possible. And the last comment from my side is that there were a few misconceptions on a gender-focused bond, especially as he mentioned. People think that when you say a gender-focused bond, it's only for women to finance to their own project, but anyone, any type of investor can really engage to help address these targets. So the second case study I want to share with you is about equity. Equity, which is a real global investment firm, well known, I can say. So they have issued a SLB, a sustainable linked bond, with 3 KPI, 1 addressing climate target and 2 addressing gender targets. So if you recall what I already presented, we at the LGX, when we identify a KPI and the SPT targeting gender, we flag it as a gender-focused bond. So this is a gender-focused SLB. And for equity itself, it was really to address an increase, to have more women on the firm first, and also on leadership position. If you remember, when we were talking about the gender smart investment strategy, leadership and employees were 2 of the strategies. So this is what equity decided to implement in his company and in his portfolio. So what about the investor reaction following the launch of the issuance of this bond? According to the bond runner, it really drew interest from different issuers who would not usually access private equity, because this type of instrument, the sustainability linked bonds, are really specific, and equity as a global investment firm, they focus on private equity. So it was really interesting that a private equity really dive in this type of initiative to really show the way. And the second point is that at the LGX, we identified that the targets were really relevant, following some study existing that gender balance in investment role is associated more into leadership of investing company. So it was really interesting that they want to implement this type of KPI and the SPT within their company to boost up the different activity. So that's all from me. I don't know if you have any question. I think I still have a few minutes, or let me know, Fiona, if it's okay. I can see the chat right now, so.
Great, thank you, Jose. I don't think we have had any questions come through, other than to share the video link, which I've sent on to someone who asked, but just to say that that video we shared is available on YouTube. But I'm not seeing any more questions at the moment, so I think that's good. But thanks so much for that presentation. I think that really brought to life what we were talking about there in a great way. So really appreciate you joining us to share that case study.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. Great. So with that, I will take us back to the presentation. We have a little bit more to cover before we take our midpoint break. So please stay tuned for a little bit more, and then we'll give you a little bit of a coffee break. So to wrap up this unit, we're going to talk a little bit more about how we can see gender equality themed products being promoted in the market more generally. And at the SSE, we did an assessment of how exchanges are working with their markets to enhance gender equality as part of our guidance for exchanges on the topic. And we found really that there are two main ways that the markets are promoting gender equality. So the first is through promoting participation in the market, and the second is around promoting impact. So we'll talk about each of those two briefly now. So when we're talking about promoting participation, what we really mean is on both the supply side and the buy side, we're seeing the application of a gender lens in global markets to access underserved segments. So on the sell side, we see markets promoting and supporting women-led businesses or female entrepreneurs. And for example, the Sourcing to Equal project is an IFC-led initiative in partnership with the Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative and Norway that aims to connect 5,000 women entrepreneurs to new markets via corporate procurement. And you can read a bit more about that in the handout. And then on the buy side, we can also see investment in and support of women traders and investors themselves. So this relates back to what we discussed earlier around the different gender lens investment strategies as being both not just at the portfolio level, but also within the investment firm itself. And this is because it's been well documented that all male investment teams indeed invest in fewer women-led businesses. An example of this type of promotion is an annual women-focused investment summit, which is run by the Johannesburg Stock Exchange called JSE She Invests. And this provides both a networking opportunity for female investors, but it also covers a variety of topics, including finance and investment literacy, and showcases different ways in which women can invest in the market. And in addition to promoting gender equal participation in markets, we also saw in our study that exchanges and markets can promote financial products and companies based on their impact as well, or their ability to actually improve gender equality, either within an organization or in society more broadly. So here we're seeing markets raising awareness of financial products and promoting listed products through awards or incentives, with the objective of shining a spotlight on those that are having a positive impact. And we also see markets creating segments or indices that aim to make it easier to find and invest in these higher impact stocks or financial products, which is a little bit about what Bloomberg spoke to us about in our last session. So I think it's also important to note that when we're talking about different indices and indexes, that one can indeed vary from the next. So as you can see here in this comparison, and as we heard already, in order to truly capture the holistic picture, we need to look at this topic from many different perspectives. So, for example, if these indices were only collecting data on women on boards, this would really only let us know one aspect of gender equality within a company. In some instances, this might be what we want to know, but if we're investing with the objective of either driving capital towards companies that enhance gender equality goals, in society, or because we understand the value of enhanced gender equality, then we'll want to have a much more broader breadth of data available to us. However, what you can notice is that between different indices, the categories of information that investors are looking for can be quite similar as well. So you can use these categories to help you when you're getting started in collecting gender data, to know that you're collecting information that will be relevant for in the financial community. And as we really learned last time, sometimes we might think that we're solving a problem or improving gender equality, but actually we could be unintentionally making things worse. So the best way to prevent that is really to thoroughly understand what's happening and capture this type of broad information. Okay, great. So let's do a quick Zoom poll now. So I'll just launch this poll for you. And this poll is really just to let us know which you think might be reasons that investors are focusing or looking at gender-related topics. Just to get a sense from what you've heard already, what do you think might be the key reasons that investors are focusing on gender-related opportunities? You can select more than one answer here if you think that more than one option is correct, as many as you think are right. And I'll just give you a moment to have a quick think about that. Okay, maybe just give us another 10 or so seconds just to have a little more think. Okay, great. I see a few of you still voting. I'll just give it 1 or 2 seconds and then I'm gonna end the poll and I'll share the results with you there. So you can see a mix of options that people have selected, but maybe the most common ones there being around managing gender-related risks and diversifying portfolios. So actually everything here is a correct answer except for number 4 around preventing men from accessing leadership positions. So yeah, there's lots of different reasons indeed why investors might want to focus on this. But of course, while gender-based investing might be sometimes seen as a zero-sum game, which prevents men from moving forwards so that women can instead, of course, gender lens investing is not meant for this. And if this is indeed the outcome, then things are being approached in the wrong way. So not about preventing men from accessing leadership positions, but really around enhancing these other aspects that we see here. Great, thanks for taking part in that, everyone. Okay, so that brings us up to the end of our 3rd module. So we're roughly at the halfway point now through today's session. So we're going to take another quick break as we did in our last session for 5 minutes. So feel free to grab a drink, take a quick stretch, or if you do have any questions that have come up so far from what we've talked about, feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box during the break as well. But otherwise, I'll just get the timer started and we'll reconvene when we reach the end of the timer. Just make sure I've got the sound on so that we get a nice music. We do. Okay, there we go.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We'll get started again with some more content to cover today. And welcome back from the quick break. So now that we've had a look at some of the financial instruments available to promote gender equality, we'll take a look now at how an organization can communicate their performance on gender equality, which can be one means of accessing these gender-specific financing mechanisms. However, this is not only important for communicating with investors your impact, but also internal communication is key to ensure that culture change that we've repeated so many times yesterday, as well as briefly today, is a necessary aspect of performance and actually takes place. So with that, our final unit of this training has two main sections. We'll talk both about communication and transparency within an organization, among its employees, as well as with external stakeholders. To start with, let's look at how you can manage effective internal communication. Well, there's many methods used to enhance transparency within an organization. What we want to highlight today is the Gender Equality Action Plan as a tool for communicating with internal stakeholders. To guide us on this, we're lucky to have with us Monica from UN Women, who will chat a little bit more about how the WEPs can be used in action for this purpose. So I'll turn it over to you now, Monica.
Thank you, Landon, and very nice to see everyone here today and the very active chats in the chat and the questions coming through. So very happy to see you all. So while it's important for an organization to have communication on their performance on gender equality, I'm actually going to look at communication from a slightly different angle. So this is how to communicate a gender action plan that leads a company's gender equality journey and to be transparent on gender equality progress. So in this session, I will present a way to use the WEPs, which we talked about yesterday and was reviewed a bit today, to advance gender equality and women's empowerment through developing an effective plan. So a gender action plan is, as many action plans, is a roadmap for gender equality and women's empowerment. It helps the company embed gender equality into its business model, the strategies, the systems, the governance, and it also contains a succinct compilation of goals, indicators, and targets. Because of this, the company will be able to better advance gender equality and women's empowerment across its value chain through the workplace, marketplace, and the community. So the basic ideas of a gender action plan are that the company can correct past and present forms of inequality. It can prevent any future recurrence of discrimination or bias. It ensures that all company strategies, policies, programs are gender responsive and transformative. It helps to develop and deepen the understanding of gender equality among all stakeholders within and outside the organization. And it also helps to track progress in real time on where it stands. So the gender action plan must include clear goals and targets. It must take into consideration findings from surveys and interviews with key stakeholders and relevant and available HR data. It needs to consider the risks, the challenges and opportunities that may occur during this implementation process, and of course include concrete and measurable actions. So how do you create one of these gender action plans? So if we can go to the next slide. So the first thing is to establish clear goals on what your company wants to achieve to meet the vision of the company. You can, of course, use the WEP's 7 principles as guidelines for this. For instance, your broad goals can be fostering an inclusive workplace or fostering an inclusive supply chain through procuring from gender responsive companies. It's another project we're working at UN Women in Cambodia. And I can also recommend that you use the WEP's gender gap analysis tool, which we call the GAT. It's a great way for companies to assess their areas of strengths, but also areas where they need to improve. It gives you a really great heat map of different areas across your company. So second, you'll need to create measures and activities that will be implemented to reach the goals that you set in the first part. And again, the WEP's journey and resources give a lot of clear steps for you to proceed. Third, when you have your goals and activities, you should set a baseline so that you can monitor progress. So where are you starting from and where are you trying to get to? For instance, if your goal is to foster an inclusive workplace, what are your current recruitment practices, such as, do you have gender sensitive and gender neutral job titles? When you post jobs, do you make sure that the text is gender inclusive and that it does not have any biases in favor of one gender or another? Or if your goal is to foster a more inclusive supply chain with gender responsive companies, what does your current procurement policy look like? Do you procure from gender responsive companies? Do you know if the companies that you're buying from are women owned or women led? All of this baseline data is crucial for you to measure the impact of your plan. So next, you'll want to set targets and a timeline to measure progress against your milestones over a period of time. As you know, targets and goals are different. Targets are indicators established to determine how successfully you are achieving an objective, and the goal is an indicator established to see whether you have achieved your objective. So simply speaking, a goal is an objective and a target has a numerical value. When translating this into gender terms, if your goal is to create an inclusive workplace, you can set your target to be something like having 30% of women representation at senior management level. If your goal is to create a more inclusive supply chain, you could set an annual target to procure X number of gender responsive companies or percentage of total procurement spend for women-owned companies. You can be bold with these goals, but you need to make sure that they're attainable within a certain time frame. And finally, you'll need to appoint an owner to be accountable for monitoring this progress and the results, as I just mentioned. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So a couple of things to consider. Is your goal specific enough and measurable? Is the goal realistic and attainable? How relevant is the goal to your organization? So if I rephrase this, how relevant is the goal to your organization according to your internal stakeholders, particularly middle management? So at UN Women, while working with numerous countries across many different cultures, we have found a common fact that what senior management thinks does not always align with what middle management sees as priority goals. Next, you'll need to think about what is the timeline for achieving this goal. Like any other action plan, you need timeline for achieving the goal. Throughout the process, you need to consult with internal stakeholders, whether you do this through surveys or group meetings, consultations, town halls, Telegram chats, whatever works for your internal communications. At the same time, you really need to make sure that you get and affirm high-level support with the CEO and with leadership at the company. You need to have a diverse team to advance gender equality. As mentioned yesterday, it's not just about women leading for gender equality. You want diversity on this team, and you also want to have male role models. And you can make gender equality and women's empowerment part of your business model. So know your current value proposition and also the value of your company. You can develop questions for stakeholder consultations to better identify the gaps that you may not be seeing and also opportunities that you are not yet aware of. And then indicate a specific time frame and a deadline to develop the action plan and then present it to the CEO and the executive team for their comment and approval. Next slide, please. So if I'm going to emphasize one thing from this slide, internal consultation and internal communication, you really need to get and seek and get organizational wide buy-in. These are really key for creating a gender action plan. When you're creating a goal that is specific, it should also be decided upon consultation with internal stakeholders. This kind of internal communication is an important role when your action plan is ready to be rolled out and in the process of being rolled out. You need to regularly communicate to all the employees and stakeholders so that they're aware of the plan and the activities, and also make them aware and updated on the progress and any results that are being generated. You can collect data on your progress and share this in the company's internal and external communication channels, whether those are annual corporate or sustainability reports or other methods. So all of this, of course, sounds quite challenging, and you may wonder how to set target indicators. So UN Women offers WEP's transparency and accountability framework that provides more than 70 indicators that you could use to set your target depending on your goal, so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel and you're not alone in this journey. The WEP's platform has a lot of resources for you. So what I presented today are from the WEP's Learn module. So creating your gender action plan is a module that's available when you become a WEP signatory on our weps.com platform. You can take this course to recap today's session. It will be in more detail and it will help you to create your gender action plan. We also do have a gender action plan template for our signatories too. So please feel free to visit our website at weps.org/learn. We'll put it into the chat for you as well. Excuse me, and use the tool. So, and again, please feel free to contact us if you have any further questions. Thank you. That's all for me, and I'll hand back to you, Fiona.
Great. Thank you so much, Monica, for that overview. Really helpful. Now, moving along, now that we've covered communicating to internal stakeholders, we'll move on to communicating to external stakeholders. To kick this off, let's do a quick poll to see how your organizations are currently disclosing gender-related information. So if you give me one moment, I'll pop that poll up. Okay, there you go. So does your company disclose gender-related information through one or more of these mechanisms? So is it through an annual financial report, CSR, ESG, or sustainability report, perhaps a gender pay gap report, all of the above, none of the above, or maybe you're just not sure? As well as you're filling this in, feel free to let us know in the chat, what do you think determines where gender-related information should appear? What factor might you be looking for to decide if, for example, information should appear in your annual financial reporting package, perhaps using the ISSB's IFRS sustainability disclosure standards, or instead in a sustainability report, perhaps using the GRI standards? So if you have any thoughts on that, feel free to let us know in the chat. Now, for the sake of time, I'll end the poll there and share the results. So we see a lot of folks, their companies are reporting on or disclosing on gender-related information through CSR, ESG, and sustainability reports. And then almost the same number are reporting or disclosing through annual financial reports. But then a fair amount are not sure. For those who are not sure, I highly recommend and really encourage you to find the answer to see where this is being reported or disclosed. So it's good information for you to have, and also to make sure that your company is disclosing and doing so in a good way. With that, who you communicate to defines where you report and what standard you will use. To report to investors, the primary location for your gender-related disclosures will be in your annual report. The International Sustainability Standards Board, or ISSB, has consolidated the major investor-related or investor-oriented sustainability disclosure standards. And then for reporting to other stakeholders, you might use the GRI standards, which are widely used by organizations globally as well. Together, these can form a holistic reporting package to a wide range of stakeholders. In terms of the content for each type of audience, for investors, you might focus your disclosure on financially material risks and opportunities related to gender equality, as well as any other information that can help investors in their investment decisions, and engagement with the company. As I said, this can go into your annual report alongside your financial statements and other disclosures. To communicate to a broader stakeholder group, you'd report more about the impact of your business on the environment, society, and economy at large, as this will be more in line with what that audience would want to know. And at the same time, this information will also be useful to some of your investors, and it will support the information you reported in your annual financial report. To report to your investors in this annual financial report, the IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standards requires your organizations to disclose on 4 broad areas, which you may already recognize if you're familiar with the recommendations of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, or TCFD. The ISSB S1 standard requires an entity to disclose information about all sustainability-related risks and opportunities that could reasonably be expected to affect the entity's cash flows, its access to finance, or cost of capital over the short, medium, or long term. While the ISSB doesn't yet provide specific metrics or disclosure requirements on gender equality, it does highlight that companies should make use of the SASB standards and GRI standards to identify appropriate disclosures for sustainability-related risks and opportunities. Looking at multi-stakeholder reporting, we went through GRI standards, that being the SSE, and identified those that most directly address gender equality to help you know where to find guidance on gender equalities disclosures for your sustainability reports. We see gender-related disclosures are a part of disclosures on employees, governance structure and composition, policy commitments, and approach to stakeholder engagement. And you can see the references to the particular sections of the GRI 2 standard on this slide, and where you'll be able to find further information on these disclosures. As well, in the handout, you'll find an extra slide providing some further detail on the gender-specific reporting requirements of the GRI standards under their new modular standards, or excuse me, their new modular structure. Now that we've looked at the standards, we want to go through a few real world examples to see what this looks like in practice. These examples are just excerpts from actual reports, so they only present a piece of the complete picture. These are examples of current practice, and we are not passing judgment on them as to whether they're good or bad practices. First, let's look at this governance disclosure from the annual report of Airtel, a Nigerian telecommunications company. In line with what the IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standards require, they reported about the processes they use to monitor, manage, and oversee their sustainability-related performance. They noted that the non-financial performance KPIs linked to their sustainability strategy include gender diversity. They also note that these KPIs are linked to the board's remuneration, which I would say is a pretty strong incentive to take this seriously. The second example we want to go through is on disclosure and strategy. And strategy disclosures aim to help the readers of your report to understand your strategy for managing sustainability-related risks and opportunities. Here we see the annual report of Astra International, an Indonesian conglomerate. Astra outlines the importance of the diversity of its employees to its success. Importantly, this statement is then backed up by a roadmap, as well as other actions to manage the opportunity they see through a gender diverse workforce. I'll note there that the gender diverse workforce is an important element. You know, we went through that yesterday and discussed how more gender diverse workforces benefit companies both internally and externally. In other parts of the report, Astra also goes into further details about how the company is implementing this, for example, through programs to make the workplace more suitable to women, and through a women's development program, which prepares women leaders for higher positions, which of course helps with the pipeline issue we discussed yesterday of there not sometimes being the qualified candidates to move along at the higher levels. but development programs can help when there is a pipeline issue in a company. Interestingly, Astra says in this annual report that human capital development in 2022 covers 3 focus areas, which are to build an agile organization, develop passionate and energetic leaders so as to be able to navigate the organization in facing business challenges, as well as carrying out the culture of continuous improvement and innovation to maintain Astra's relevancy in the era of disruptions. So in other words, Astra International essentially states that a more diverse and gender equal business can help to maintain the company's relevancy in an era of disruptions. So this is an interesting insight into their strategic approach as a whole and to gender equality. For an example on risk management disclosures, let's have a look at Coca-Cola HBC's annual report. As a reminder, risk management disclosures are intended to help the reader of the report to understand your processes to identify, assess, prioritize, and monitor sustainability-related risks and opportunities. Coca-Cola HBC provided an overview of how they go about identifying material risks, saying that to assess inward impacts, we use our annual materiality survey, but also investor-driven frameworks such as SASB, insights from regular calls with investors, their risk management process, including climate scenario analysis, and input from our markets and business units. They also assess their outward impacts in the matrix you see on the left-hand side of your screen, which you can see on the horizontal axis. So there you can see the impact of the issue on environment and society from moderate high to very high. And you can see the importance to stakeholders on the left, again, from moderate high to very high. And in that, we can see a few interesting insights, but human rights, diversity, and inclusion is considered moderate to high on both of the axes. For our fourth and final example, oh yeah, that little graphic highlights where it is. But for our fourth and final example, we have a disclosure example on reporting gender-related metrics and targets used by Cemex. Cemex is a Mexican multinational cement company. So Cemex also stated in its annual report that it's a signatory to the UN Women's Empowerment Principles, as well as the UN Global Compact's target gender equality. In this example, we see Cemex updating on the progress made towards gender equality in its workforce. Now, sorry, I know someone is noting the source isn't available. Thanks for highlighting that, and we'll make sure we correct that. But going back to the slides, Cemex is in an industry that has been traditionally male-dominated, and therefore it is starting from a lower percentage of women than perhaps a company from another industry that's less traditionally male-dominated. This example does, however, show that any business can take action towards gender equality, including those in male-dominated sectors and fields. Cemex also set a new goal to increase the representation of women in senior management positions. They specified their base year from so they used 2015 as their baseline. And then they set a target of 30% up from just 13% in 2022, and a target year of 2030, which is good target setting. Like we discussed earlier, having clear metrics and targets and communicating those to investors internally and externally is very important. Later on in the report, they also report on metrics such as percentage of workforce by gender, percentage of female employees by position, and woman to men remuneration ratio by region. And that some of these being disaggregated, such as by region, is really important as well to help readers of the report better understand the details of gender equality in Cemex. On the topic of metrics and disclosures, we recently released a new report that provides the first comprehensive comparative assessment of gender-related disclosure metrics issued by stock exchanges and standard setters worldwide. and we really encourage you to take a few minutes to check this report out. We'll share a link to that report in the chat as well. In addition to the standards we just discussed, there's also some additional organizations that you can look to for more guidance on this topic. For example, there are guiding principles for you to consider, such as the UN Charter of Human Rights, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, as we've talked about, of course, SDG 5, or again, of course, the UN WEPs, Women's Empowerment Principles, which we've discussed a lot yesterday and today. In addition, it's always important to know what disclosures are required of your organization by law. Provided, or beyond this, there's also a number of rankings or benchmarks to consider, such as those of the World Benchmarking Alliance. There's also a number of indices and rating agencies that take into account the social performance of companies, such as the Bloomberg Gender Equality Index. Finally, there are management standards that your organization may wish to adopt, which can help enhance your organization's performance on gender, such as ISO 26000 or 26000, guidance on social responsibility. Gender equality is also present in many other ISO standards. There's also the SDG or Social Development Goals impact standards, which are management practice standards designed to guide businesses and investors to embed sustainability into their decision-making approach. So with that, we hope this provides an overview of some of the disclosure guidelines you can consider, but previously we also talked about standards and certifications that can be used to develop your organization's gender equality practices and disclosures. With that, we're happy to have Nina Pearson here from the EDGE Certified Foundation to tell us more about their certification program. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Nina. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and hello from my side. I will share my screen.
Sorry, Nina, I've just given you access. Oh, you've got it now. Great.
Yeah, so you should be able to see my screen now. Good. Yes, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be able to introduce you all to EDGE certification today. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to quickly take you through what organizations assess when they undertake EDGE certification, how it's assessed, and I will also show 2 examples of how EDGE certification has helped 2 separate organizations move from intention to impact when it comes to their workplace diversity, fairness, and inclusion efforts. So firstly, it's important to know that EDGE is a voluntary sustainability standard that focuses on achieving gender equity in the workplace and better gender balance at all levels of an organization. We also have the EDGE Plus standard, which enables organizations to look at the intersectionality between gender and other aspects of diversity, such as race, ethnicity, disability, age. So our standards provide an in-depth assessment of an organization's own workforce and supports organizations to build more fair, diverse, and inclusive workforces. We're not a disclosure standard. We're a measure of actual performance, and that enables organizations to understand where they stand today, where the gaps are, and how to build a focused, achievable action plan toward greater gender and intersectional equity. To maintain impartiality, EDGE certification operates as a third-party certification system. This means that audits are performed by and the certificates are issued by independent third-party certification bodies. So moving on to our methodology. The EDGE standards and certification system are built on 4 foundational pillars that define success in gender and intersectional equity. So these 4 are already displayed on the slide. The first pillar is known as representation, and we look at representation across different types of jobs and different levels of responsibility in the organization. The second pillar is pay equity. The third pillar is effectiveness of policies and practices. So we're looking that an organisation has a solid framework of policies and practices that are ensuring equitable career flows. And we look at policies and practices across 5 focus areas, which are equal pay for equivalent work, recruitment and promotion, leadership development, training and mentoring, flexible working, and organisational culture. And then the final pillar is about understanding how inclusive the culture of the organisation is, as reflected in employees' experiences in terms of their career development opportunities within the organisation. For the assessment, 3 sources of information are used to evaluate an organisation's own workforce. So these sources are organisational statistics, and an organisation chooses a 12-month reference period for these organisational statistics. The second is policies and practices that the organisation has in place during that same reference period. And the final is the experience of the employees, which is captured through an employee survey, and that's undertaken close to the end of the reference period. So we use these 3 sources of information to triangulate them and look at gender, and if Edge Plus is chosen, and intersectional equity from these 3 different angles. So the statistics, the policies and practices, and the employee experience. And this triangulated approach helps to identify if these sources are aligned, or if and where there are gaps between what a company might say it does and what the data shows, as well as how those actions are actually experienced across different groups by the employees. So it's this depth of insight that helps organisations move beyond assumptions and enable them to design targeted and effective solutions. So Edge certification has 3 levels of achievement. So we use a tiered system, which means organisations at different stages of progress can take part. There are absolutely no barriers to entry, so any organisation that commits to the process will be assessed. The goal is to recognise where an organisation is today and to provide an action plan for making further progress over time. So Edge certificates are valid for 2 years, and that's because achieving gender and intersectional equity is an ongoing process. So the certification provides a comprehensive assessment of an organisation's current status, and then the recertification every 2 years allows time to implement the action plans and ensure that the certification reflects the organisation's progress and continuing commitment. So very quickly, the levels of certification. The first level is Edge Assess, which recognises the commitment. Edge Move is the second level, and this showcases progress in workplace gender equity. So at the Edge Move level, the organisation has reached the Edge standards in some of the assessed areas. And finally, Edge Lead is the highest Edge certification level, showing that the organisation meets every single one of the Edge standards across the 4 pillars of the methodology. So organisations can be certified Edge Plus as well. This is in addition to one of the 3 levels of certification. So all organisations undertake the gender binary assessment, and Edge Plus is an add-on to the Edge gender binary certification. And it enables organisations to deepen their understanding of gender-related matters by then analysing the intersectionality of gender and other aspects of diversity. So I mentioned before that the Edge ecosystem is a third-party certification system, and I also just wanted to briefly mention some of the stakeholders in our ecosystem that enable us to deliver an independent, credible third-party certification system. So we work with Edge Strategy, and Edge Strategy works with and prepares organisations to become ready for Edge certification through the use of its software solution, which is called Edge Empower. Edge Strategy also licenses the use of the Edge Empower platform to licensing partners. And they currently have a licensing agreement in place with the IFC. So IFC is licensed to use Edge Empower and work with organizations and prepare them for Edge certification. And then we also work with 3 independent certification bodies. These are FlowCert, Intertech, and SGS, who undertake the independent audits. So now we have the 2 case studies, which demonstrate the impact of working with the EDGE standards. So on the slide on the left, you can see some high-level information about the organisation. It's an organisation from the energy industry with a large workforce dominated by men, and they have been certified 3 times. And then the results graph, the graphs for representation are on the right of the slide. We can see that when they were first assessed in 2020, they didn't meet the EDGE threshold for gender representation at any management level. As part of the EDGE certification process, organizations create an action plan. And for this company, their primary focus became improving representation over the next years. So with this clear action plan in place, they were able to significantly strengthen the gender balance within their management levels. For junior management and upper management, they reached the minimum required level of 30% according to the EDGE standards. And so, yeah, this progress is a good example of what committed action with regard to pay equity, recruitment and promotion of female talent, as well as leadership development training and mentoring can achieve. That's what this organisation focused on, and they were able to shift representation, so have more women in management in a fairly short time frame as well. So it's great progress. The second case, this is a slightly smaller company in the financial services sector, which has now been EDGE certified 2 times. And looking to the graphs on the right of the slide again, this time we're looking at the results of the policies and practices analysis section and we can see that when they were first assessed, their policies and practices, particularly around recruitment and promotion and leadership development, training and mentoring, they were in place. They're not far off the threshold, but they're too high level, perhaps too generic to drive real change. So the organisation identified that it really needed to align its policies and practices with their gender strategy. And so through a more targeted and practical action plan, closely aligned with their overall business strategy, they were able to strengthen these areas significantly. And as a result, they achieved the EDGE standard across all aspects of policies and practices effectiveness upon recertification. And on both slides in the center bottom, we also have the process, and this is referring to the process that organizations go through when they're working with the EDGE Empower software. So here you can see our logo circle. You might see some familiar brands, names. Cemex is on the logo circle. We have organizations from all types of sectors and regions, including listed companies, international organizations, and others, and they are all assessed against the same EDGE standards. So there are really different and flexible pathways to work with the EDGE standards and to reach different certification levels. And like I said, any organisation is eligible for EDGE certification so long as it has over 100 employees. That's it from my side. Thank you for listening. And if you don't already, please follow us on LinkedIn at EDGE Certification or visit our website for more information. And yeah, thank you for having me, and happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Nina. Really appreciate it. And I think hopefully demonstrates to people a really, robust structure that they can use to support them on their journeys here. I'll just pause a second in case we do have a little bit of time, just in case anyone has a question they want to quickly get in for Nina before we wrap up. But I think otherwise, we can kind of close off there. I suppose one thing I would just check from your side, in terms of maturity of organizations in this process, is there a particular level of kind of maturity on gender equality that you'd recommend organizations have before they start the certification process, or do you think it can kind of be helpful at any point in the journey?
Yeah, I think it's definitely helpful for any point in the journey. I think a lot of organizations are perhaps hesitant to start because they're concerned that they don't have a certain level of maturity. But that's also, why we have the Edge Assess level. It's all about commitment and then working towards the next levels of progress, and that can really help organizations. So I would say at any point of the journey, those organizations should start and they'll see progress.
Sure. No, thank you. That's good to clarify and hopefully encouraging for those listening. We have had just one quick question come in from Alison, and she's asked approximately what proportion of Edge certified organizations are choosing to go with the Edge Plus certification. Do you know that?
That's a good question. I don't actually have the stats. But it's definitely increasing, and I would say probably 1/3 go with Edge Plus. Yeah, and Edge Plus is super flexible as well. So with Edge Plus, you don't have to choose all of the sources of information, and depending on an organization's cultural context, the country they're in, the legal requirements, and the availability of data, they can also choose just one dimension or up to 6 dimensions, and choose the appropriate sources of information as well. So it's a flexible standard.
Great, perfect. Thank you for clarifying that. So I think that's all the questions we had. So thanks very much again for sharing. That's super interesting. Great to have you taking part. So that brings us towards wrapping up the session now from our side. So before we kind of close off with a few resources and takeaways and the all-important information about your certificates, we'll just take one final trip back to Menti together, just to wrap up on what we've covered so far today, and maybe a few reflections overall that you might have on the training course as well. So if we can just reshare the Menti link again, but hopefully you may still have that to hand. Be great if you could just take a reflection now on those topics that we started with at the beginning of today's session, around investment strategies, communicating gender issues to investors, and explaining the financial value of gender equality to your colleagues. And let us know maybe where you think you're up to in terms of your understanding and comfort on these topics after the session. And obviously we hope to have helped you move along that scale a little bit. Okay, I see a few respondents so far who are coming back, I think, a little more comfortable, higher up the scale than we had previously. I think we were more in the 6s and 5s when we started the session, so that's great to see, feeling a little bit more confident on these topics there. Perfect. Okay, we'll move on. I think we have one final question, and just to get you to reflect really on what is your main takeaway or learning from today's session, and maybe from the course as a whole and the 2 parts we've covered. So I know we've covered lots of different things, so often it might be hard to think of one thing, but I know often when we do a training course, it won't be everything that we talk about that we take action on. But hopefully there's at least 1 or 2 things that you've heard from us in the training course that you think are going to be things you can either implement in your organizations, or things that you can take away to understand more or discuss with your colleagues. So it would be great if you could just share in a couple of words maybe what your main takeaway is from today, and maybe what action point you'd like to take forward after the training course. Give everyone a moment or 2 longer just to reflect, and you can use the chat as well if you're not on Menti and just want to share that way. Okay, someone's mentioned about the communication side and maybe wanting to look into that, so that's great. give it a moment just in case maybe one or two more people want to share their takeaways. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so maybe thinking about the women's empowerment plans, maybe that's talking about using the tools that we had shared by Monica about the women's empowerment principles. So definitely a great resource to take away and look at. People looking at maybe the tools that they can use to improve, maybe the certifications, as we've heard from Nina on, or looking at opportunities to enhance gender equity in the workplace. Fantastic. Thanks everyone for sharing. And yeah, we hope you'll be able to take forward those topics. So as we wrap up, I'll just take us back for a couple of quick more slides just to summarize a couple of things now as we close the session. Okay, so there are a number of resources available for you to continue your learning journey, and these are ordered by the units that we've gone through in the training today. But I also like to remind you that you can download the slide handouts, which contain many resources and links to what we've discussed for further information. And Landon has reshared with you the link in the chat to that as well. We'll also be sharing the recording from the training session today and yesterday's training on those pages as well in the next few days. And also, I'd encourage you to stay tuned to the SSE's training by subscribing to our newsletter, and you'll get updates then on new training sessions or any relevant resources that might be coming out on these topics. And you can also find the guest speaker presentations that we talked through in the last two sessions, as well as a number of academic publications that might be of interest. And I'll just show you quickly as an example, by unit in the handout, you can find a summary of some of the key reports and tools that we've talked about, or you might want to look at with the hyperlinks to access those. So make sure to check out the handout and you'll see for each unit that we've covered a number of reports and tools and maybe even some training opportunities as well to support you further on these topics. All right, so we're very grateful for you having taken part in this two-part program with us. We know that's a lot of time to take out of your working week, and so we're grateful for that in particular. And as a token of our appreciation, we'll be happy to share with you a completion certificate for taking part in the training. So to receive your certificate, you'll need to complete the feedback survey, and Landon has just shared the link with you in the chat to access that survey. And you'll also receive that email, that link again via email in the next 24 hours in an automated email from Zoom. So you can either click on that link now in the chat, or you can also look out for an email from Zoom, which will provide the link to all participants as well. We'd love, of course, to have your feedback on the programme when you take part in the survey. So please do share your thoughts with us as well. And then once you've taken part in the survey, please allow up to a week to receive your completion certificate, as we send those out in batches on a weekly basis. But if you haven't received your certificate after that point, make sure to maybe double check your spam folders in case it's been caught in your junk. And otherwise, feel free to reach out to us at the contact details at the end of the presentation if you need to help in getting your certificate. But otherwise, I think that brings us to the close of the session. So a few final things just to share. As I said, firstly, a number of contact routes to reach the organisations who've taken part in today's training. And for our guest speakers, you'll find their contact details in their presentations on the webpage. But just to say a final thank you again to our guest speakers, Jose from the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, Nina from the Edge Certified Foundation. And again, thank you to all of the partners who've made this programme possible. Firstly, to the SSE's official supporters who provide great ongoing support to this programme, and in particular to our partners for this training, so the IFC, to UN Women, and especially to Monica for joining us today, Columbia University and the Government of Luxembourg. And of course, a big thank you to the Laos Securities Exchange and the Cambodia Securities Exchange and SERC in Cambodia as well for their support. And a big thank you, of course, to our Khmer interpreter who's helped to broaden access to this programme. We greatly appreciate your input. And the final thank you, of course, a big thank you to all of you for taking part in our training today. We hope you've learned some helpful new things from our time together, and we hope to have you join us on a future training session in the future. So wishing you the best of luck in taking this forward in your organizations, and have a great end of the day. Thanks, everyone.